I think the number one thing to look for is a place where you can see what the graduates are doing and what the support system is for you as an looking for internships and post-graduation jobs.
Yeah.
Because it's not necessarily the street name of the school that is going to get you the job. It's the connections that you have.
Welcome to Clothing Culture, a fashion industry podcast at the intersection of technology and innovation. I'm Emily Lane.
And I'm Bret Schnitker. We speak with experts and disruptors who are moving the industry forward and discuss solutions to real industry challenges.
Clothing Culture is produced by Stars Design Group, a global design and production house with more than 30 years of experience. Welcome back to another episode of Clothing Culture. Today we are joined by friend and colleague, Mary Ruppert Stroescu. We have conversations with Mary almost every day, and it's expanding across so many different spaces in the industry. We could have a number of conversations today. Mary is an educator in fashion at Washington University. She's an innovator, having invented a patented sustainable textile solution for the industry. She is a designer and has had a successful business in Paris over a long period of time. And so we're just always talking about our industry and what's transpiring and where it's going. And we've collaborated on programs together. So we just thought, you know what, it's time to just have a nice conversation with Mary. So, hey, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm very honored. The illustrious Clothing Couture team here.
Well, I think it might be fun to just kind of start on the education side of things today. There's a lot that are the kids in school are having to think about as they are, vetting out schools and then, trying to decide where to go after school and all of those things. What do you see as some of the, the bigger challenges they face?
I think in today's world, one of the biggest challenges is pairing craft and the beauty and the knowledge and the art of crafting, sewing, making high quality garments, patterning, all the traditional side, and fabric innovation, understanding what the different textiles are and things like that from a traditional point of view. And then embracing and learning about, or learning how to learn, really, because technology changes so fast. All of the other, digital fashion and 3D virtual realization of garments and smart textiles and, biological textiles. And it's, I was just saying to someone the other day, every time I start to prepare a course, I kind of hyperventilate because there's so much to teach. Used to be, I knew what to do, but now there's that balance of, because you can't, I really don't recommend not going 100% digital without understanding the tactility of the fabric and the things that are needed in the craft of putting a garment together and how to scale that at an industry level. It's really not going to produce clothes that we can wear that are really comfortable and meeting all of our needs if we only go digitally. I think it's an important aspect.
We live in a digital world.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Something between physical and digital. And that was kind of first I ever heard that term was from Janice Wong at Al-Anon, so I got to give her credit for that. Digital. But it's a great word.
Yeah. So I kind of see this challenge as a matrix. So you've got the craft and the technology here, and then you've got the desire to express your individuality and who you are, and the need to find yourself as a creative artist that's expressing themselves through clothing that will be worn by someone. And then the other side of the matrix is the job market and the industry, and how to marry all four of those corners into a meaningful education that will help each individual succeed in this future that holds jobs that we don't even know will exist there are going to be jobs out there in 5-10 years. Even now, I was doing some research about working on a paper about AI in fashion, and I realized that there's a new profession emerging of prompt engineers.
Yeah, for sure.
To know what to put into the AI engine to get what you want.
That was a big discussion when we were at the AI Summit in Paris.
Yeah.
That, AI is very literal and creatives are not. And there are a lot of these companies that are coming about to actually be translators for creatives, an input.
So the study of that, it mixes linguistics
Right.
with, computer programming and big data and the fashion industry technology. And these are fields that before kind of looked at each other on the side,
Right.
But working at Washington University, which is, Research One, highly focusing on innovation and research with a very high standard for admissions for our students. Working there, sometimes people say, fashion at WashU. And I'm like, yeah, we work with the med school, we work with the engineering school, we work with arts and sciences on, linguistics and archaeology. I mean, fashion it has always been a multidisciplinary discipline.
But even more now.
More now.
Talent and technology, fashion, art meets science is the name of the game today, isn't it?
Right.
Yeah.
That's right. And so in some ways, that's super exciting. In a lot of ways, it's super exciting.
Yeah.
But daunting for an educator.
Yeah. And for a student.
Yeah.
To kind of figure out where you find yourself in all of that future.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned matrix, this fashion matrix. It is kind of like red pill, blue pill kind of thing. It's like red pill, I'm a creative person, and blue pill, oh my God, I got to go out there and deal with all of the challenges from a business aspect.
Yeah, well, and then the other, what do you want to say? The other thing in the mix is to really succeed in fashion, you need to master social media and have a presence and know how to document your work and explain to people why what you do is different and
tell a story.
That's it. That big story and everything like that. It's a lot more complex than people might imagine.
So, I'm not an official educator, but I mentor a few people, but as an official educator, there must be so much pressure on preparing students for the real world, right? They come in, every one of them thinks, I'm going to be the next major designer. The reality, I don't know what the actual statistic is, but it's 1 in 1,000, right?
Well, and especially since, the advent of Project Runway, the number of students in fashion programs has grown exponentially around the world, really, since fashion became something that was a household word and, designing became kind of like a household word.
And it's become, in some ways, more easily accessible for someone to launch a line. Whether or not they can make a living at it is a different story.
Right.
But there's so many micro lines that are starting up and people being, being creative and expressive in what they're doing. And, we always talk about, we've talked about in previous episodes how there's been, in some ways, a line drawn between fashion designers and true artists that paint with other mediums like, acrylics or oil or whatever the case may be. And most of them are just as creative. They just paint with cloth, right?
Yeah, in some ways.
Yeah.
Okay. The field of design is much newer than the field of art, which, is from the origin of man.
Are you saying we painted paintings naked at one point? Before clothing, we were still painting.
The field of design was established in the 20th century to be something that is reproducible. So art doesn't have to be reproducible.
Yeah.
That's one of the constraints that fashion designers have. It has to be reproducible.
Yeah.
It has to be...
unless you're couture, right? Because couture...
But still, in couture today, you make a sample that the model wears, and then you reproduce it for your individual client.
Customers.
Oh.
Yeah.
So they're not reproducing it in an industrial form, but they are reproducing it to that client-specific body.
So it's not just one.
Not just one thing. It needs to be reproducible. And then it has to have a utility. Design equals utility.
Very interesting.
Of some sort. I mean, and that's where I think in that one and also in the reproducibility, we see lines meshing between art and fashion.
Yeah.
Because, you have wearable art that are these fantastic one-off pieces that, Iris Van Herpen, many of her things are not.
Yeah,
you can't
no.
sit in them. You can't,
Right.
you can't get in a car and drive with them.
Right.
But so she is, has items that push that boundary between design and art.
Yeah.
But when it all comes down to it, it does have the function of going around a body with the body's restrictions. An arm is there.
Right.
And so whether you don't want to make it move, you still have to think about it.
100%.
And in art, you don't have those restrictions.
True.
Yeah.
Interesting. And so, with the statistics being what they are, how do you prepare a student for, look, you could be one of the 1,000, but many of these people really need to be prepared for the industry of fashion, right? Being a cog in the wheel, a component of a larger engine.
Yeah, well, and that's kind of the advantage of the types of curricula that I work within, in that, you have specific courses, so they're directed to specific topics.
Okay.
We have a fiber manipulation course, which is completely what can you do with a fiber? So it's open and cool and, very, very creative.
Sounds fun.
Yeah, you have to come and play around.
I do. I want to.
But then we also have a product development course that's very much about tech packs and, bill of materials and how to take a garment and take it into the industry. And so you kind of have to give a student a little bit of each aspect, and then they find where their strength is.
Yeah. How much time is spent technically, walking through the garment technically versus the creative expression during a 4-year course, I guess?
I would say if you include in walking through a garment technically the clothing construction, the patterning, the draping, the grading of sizes, the tech packs and things like that, I would say it's probably around an 80-20 deal.
Okay.
Because we don't have enough time to work on the creativity.
Yeah.
Because, like I was saying, trying to get all that technology in there, you got to teach the browseware and, try to get all of the patterning on the computer and everything. So all that really is like the technical side. And so that 20%, we also have an experimental design class, which is even, like, you don't even have to use fibers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so we have a few of those, but it really is a lot of the burden, I would say, or the challenges to the student to find their own path.
Yeah, and that usually takes time.
How do you wrestle with? So we've come to your class and done some critiques, which is always really fun, and it's also enjoyable to see the transformation and growth of your students from a season or a semester to semester and year after year, and we get to hear other people come in and critique, and sometimes we hear some people go, oh, this is the time to just be creative, get as crazy and as wild as you can. But we're, from the industry, and we're, the people that come to us, we're very much like, you need to hone skills for the real world, And so how do you wrestle with what's the best approach there?
Yeah, that is the eternal question, I think, because the truth is this capstone collection or final senior collection or whatever a school would call it, it really truly is the one time when you have a team of supporters to help you do what you've always thought you wanted to do as a designer. And it is important to have a voice and to create a visual vocabulary and a fashion design aesthetic that kind of represents yourself to where you can jump off of. So what we've kind of come to the conclusion of is we encourage students to do kind of like a 2-part. A lot of companies will have a signature like runway show that gets all the press and gets all of the excitement. I'll never forget the first time I went to Paris and went to the Yves Saint Laurent Rive Gauche store. I thought I was going to see these gorgeous dresses and all this great stuff. And what I saw in the store was so boring.
It was basics.
It was basics. So I think in order to, really, and a lot of companies do that, right? You've got your diffusion lines, you've got all of that. So we have the idea of your leadership creativity, your maximal creative pieces are rendered first and explored first, and then we take them through a process of developing a diffusion line. Mm-hmm. And for that diffusion line, they think about reproducibility in series, in mass production. They're much more held to task on pricing and on sourcing of materials and on manufacturing methods and things like that.
Yeah. Wow.
So they kind of have a bit of both in their portfolio.
Right.
The kind of challenge sometimes is when a student is really directed to wanting to work in a corporate retail environment and they're really not into, and I can understand, creativity it's a continuum. It's not a one spot. You can have creativity in making very simple things as much as in the product. Here in making simple things and having a lot of restrictions, the creativity oftentimes is in the thought process behind the end product. Mm-hmm. And in like a leadership creativity, that's where the end product is like, wow. It's not to say the thought process isn't as well, but sometimes, you think, oh, that's just like modern art, Kandinsky's just a few slops on the on the canvas, but really it took years and years of formal training to get to that abstraction.
Sure.
And so sometimes it's like pulling out of a creator what they're capable of. I was just talking to a new designer here in St. Louis. She's moved here a year ago. Her name is Anna Loosely. And she is her craft is amazing. And she said when she was doing her master's, her professor said, go out and have a drink or something. Loosen up.
Well, your last name is Loosely.
Do something kind of crazy. Do something different. Yeah. And they were trying to push her to go out there. And then her, I showed you guys the pictures, and I can't wait for you all to meet her. She had some great results. So sometimes.
So drinking and fashion do work.
Do work. Well, this is why we have a bar at the office.
That's right. That's true. Right.
So, go ahead.
Well, I was thinking, you've spent so much time in the education sector. You've been through a number of universities. And as students are making decisions on where to go, fashion's kind of a cool section to get into. There's a lot of creatives that want to go into that field. But as we've talked before, you end up in different parts of the industry. Not everyone can be a great designer. Right. What are the main things that you think a student should be looking for when they're exploring a university to go to,
what a good
knowing the reality of what our industry is?
Yeah, what a good question. And before I get to that, I do want to jump back to one other thing that you said, because you said not everyone becomes a great designer and they end up in the other jobs.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that students need to, or potential people who like fashion, right? So many people contact us and say, oh, I like fashion, but I can't sew. Oh, I don't know how to draw, but I have a great sense of style. Yeah. And the exciting thing about studying fashion is that there are so many jobs, right? Like we have a great team of interns here this summer at Stars in all sorts of different aspects, but they're all studying fashion, right? And so
they wash my car amazingly, very creatively. No, just kidding.
Right. So I do, I think that's one thing that one should think about on the onset, and to be open to discovering jobs that you didn't really realize existed.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Now, in evaluating a school, and you're right, I have taught at private kind of like technical schools. I've taught at Research One institutions. I've taught at private liberal arts schools. Mm-hmm. And so I think the number one thing to look for is a place where you can see what the graduates are doing and what the support system is for you as an looking for internships and post-graduation jobs. Yeah. Because it's not necessarily the street name of the school that is going to get you the job. It's the connections that you have.
That's right. You have a very good placement rate.
We do. We have wonderful connections. And I was just talking the last winter when I was in New York, I was talking to someone who teaches at FIT. And I was saying, we went to see, so-and-so at this big company that's an alum, and telling them about all the alums at the companies we were going to. And she was like, how do your students get all these jobs? I teach so many great students, and they're always looking for jobs, and it's so tough. And
Yeah.
my one answer, one is, of course, we teach
You're
them
just
fabulously,
wonderful.
and
That's
they're
right. Of
and they're
course.
great, very talented and intelligent people, but that network is key.
Yeah. And that's not something you would traditionally think of as a student.
Right.
You'd be like, oh, am I going to get all my technical education? Am I
Yeah.
going to get all my
Yeah.
creative,
Yeah.
input? But
Yeah.
you're right.
I
I think that's a critical
It really
part
is.
of this.
to
You're
really
spending
kind
a
of,
lot of money going into school.
and time and energy and
Yeah.
effort. And so
Yeah.
that's one. I think another thing to think about is, like I said earlier, understanding and knowing those key technical traditional things is super important. But also be sure that the professorial staff, or if they don't have it, that they are very tightly linked with lovely industry partners that have industry experience. Sometimes in people like, especially in universities, like four-year universities, state universities, and things like that, they really require one to have a PhD or a terminal degree. A PhD or an MFA to teach. And a lot of times people who go that route don't have industry experience.
Right.
And so they know how to research, they can write papers, they can take a problem and, explore it and make a contribution to the body of knowledge. But from a fashion industry perspective, sometimes they don't know what they don't know. Mm-hmm. And so I would really be sure that, if you are considering a school that has, great PhDs and, things like that, just be sure that either they have done professional internships. I mean, I go to Paris all the time. I work with you guys. I've always got my fingers in what's happening in the industry and I always have. Since I started my career out in the industry, that was kind of like a natural. But I think that's an important aspect to look at in the professorial group of the place that you're studying. And then a third thing is try not to get stuck in the technical and the micro world of designing your collection. Be sure that you have a solid liberal arts background, that you know how to read an article from The Economist about what's happening in Ukraine, that you know how to discuss with someone at a I don't want to say necessarily intellectual level, but at a sophisticated level, let's say, what's happening in the world.
Right. Because geopolitical influences are significant
So
in our industry.
important.
Yeah.
So important. And also think about the business side of things because, we are in a business, like I was saying earlier,
Right.
we're designing, so we're making a product for a market that is going to be sold. And I have I don't know, no one I knew was in fashion when I went to study. And I didn't even know it was a major, but I had always sewn. And I took classes in, political science. And I noticed that those classes were kind of paralleling some things that were happening in fashion and marketing. And it's all a big mix. So having that liberal arts thinking cap will help you to not stay in your first job, because that's another thing that I've noticed in talking with people in the industry who are hiring and things. It's like, okay, this person was a great beginning assistant designer, they moved up to associate designer. Now I need someone who can look at the system and maybe be a manager of other people. So if there's any way you could get experience in managing, in organizing, in project management, things like that. Sometimes it's easier to just take all those classes that you like and that are really fun.
Yeah.
And really kind of just go to a place where you can experiment with other aspects of education.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Okay, so you are you are actually one of those rare and special people that have made it, and you are the designer. You're out there. People know your name. What are some of the bigger challenges they face?
Yes. Well, one of the biggest challenges, we kind of touched on it earlier, is you get a name, you get a reputation, if you will, for a certain type of an aesthetic, and then times change.
Yeah.
People change, technology changes, and like one of the biggest challenges is staying true to your core person, your core aesthetic, your core expression, while being able to adapt to different things. Mm-hmm. And just on a personal note, we were talking about this textile upcycling and sustainable design technology that I've been working on for about 12 years. And I started working with T-shirt scraps because that was kind of like a low-hanging fruit. A college campus, get T-shirts. And with my team, I always love to work in a team. With my team, we went in a direction that was kind of almost a women's ready-to-wear, not T-shirts, that wasn't really me. And so I have these pieces that people love. It's like, but that wasn't really me. Mm-hmm. It was my team, and I was leading the team. And so this past summer, I've been really doing a lot of reflection and looking at different materials and different things. And I have a collection I'm working on that is using wool. Ooh. And they're Pendleton wool scraps, the selvage scraps that Pendleton sells, and velvet. And we are. I reached out to my friends who are from other countries, because my husband was born in another country, and I have a lot of friends that were born in other countries and actually live in other countries. And in 2021, when the U.S. pulled out of Afghanistan, I was email mentoring a young woman from Afghanistan who was trying to get out of the country because she risked, her life because of the change in regime. And that's a whole nother, discussion. Right. But I got to see her when I was in Paris. I got to see her in person.
Oh,
she
saw
came
that
and we
photo.
talked.
Okay.
Yes.
Oh.
And we got to really sit across the table and be in each other's space.
Wow.
And at the time when I was mentoring her and she was trying to get out of the country, she got to France. I thought about the concept of loss. And I had that be a theme for my classes, my fiber manipulation class that fall. And I saw how some students took loss into, I've lost my childhood, but I'm starting a whole new life. Or, they turned the loss idea into joy. So as I was walking in Tower Grove Park one morning, I thought, I want to focus on loss and what people lose by leaving their country and what they gain by coming to another country.
Right.
So I reached out to a bunch of my friends, and they sent me statements, and now I'm embroidering those statements on little pieces of velvet that I'm integrating into this coat.
Amazing.
It's going to be like the leadership piece for a collection that I feel is finally going to be like really my thing,
That's incredible. I love that.
I'm excited.
Being a designer and seeing what it's not as easy as maybe 10, 15 years ago where, you'd be a designer, you'd create a great garment, people would just love the garment and accept it and buy it. It was a simpler time, if you will, right? Today, there's so many things influencing fashion, sustainable initiatives, size inclusivity, gender neutrality, geopolitical kind of things. All of these influences are impacting the way that designers are looking at things. What are you seeing? How are designers grappling with all of these different elements? Because much like any artist in any medium, designers have a community. They express the social norms of what are going on in their own way. And in this way, it's in garments. So what's happening out there in this crazy world?
Yeah, good question. I think that, the little piece of it that I study and I know of and I navigate, I see a lot more collaboration than ever before. A lot of cross understanding of other people's needs and wants and things. The list of non-exhaustive, obviously, list of challenges or new areas of emphasis that you just mentioned. Everyone doesn't experience all of those on their own, right?
Right, sure.
So there is a lot more openness and outreach to say, maybe have a conversation with someone who has a different perspective than you, and not trying to say you talk to someone for 10 minutes and you know everything about them,
right,
but just raising awareness and maybe working together. I see a lot more collaboration happening.
That is really insightful. And how all these things are driving collaboration, because you're seeing big brands collaborating with a different specific designer. That never used to happen in the past.
Yeah.
It was like the designer's the island and everyone kind of goes.
Yeah.
But today it seems like a real mashup of
Is that
different
for
collective things.
inspiration, or do you think it's for kind of the marketing benefit of being able
It could
to...
be all of the above, right? It's
Both.
it's kind of a global
Definitely
thing.
a little both.
But very insightful. If you're trying to bring in a sustainable initiative, you're going to work with somebody that has more of a sustainable band to help you get further down the road.
That's just
right?
it. Yeah. Maybe I think, the forward-facing, Montclair genius project of collaborating with famous designers was obviously an inspiration and a marketing aspect.
Yeah.
But if you have a brand where you're trying to explore a new avenue, one of our alumni is the creative director for Another Tomorrow, which is a new sustainable only brand. Her name is Liz Giardini. She's from St. Louis. And she was telling us that, they are really, they don't use bone because that's animal. It's a whole new way of thinking about making clothes with that 100% sustainability lens. And she has collaborated with sustainability experts that's not a marketing deal.
Right.
It's a real knowledge acquisition.
Yeah.
And they've been so successful because they really have this fundamental and always overarching direction in that area. So I think some of the collaborations are going to be even more backroom to be able to address. I mean, you mentioned earlier Alvenon and all of their work with sizing. And, I think there's a lot of opportunity in size inclusivity because, you do have gender neutrality, but bodies are kind of shaped according to those two genders.
Right.
So building a new size set that will accommodate both types of shapes is an exciting area, but it's going to take collaborations.
Yeah, size inclusivity and size transparency as people are buying more online, reducing this footprint of waste that we have. Science of fit's becoming more and more important.
Totally.
And transparency of that fit's becoming more important.
Yeah.
Well, and we've talked about the two bodies that the genders are tied to, but there's also within each body type endo, ecto, meso,
Exactly.
the different shapes. So now we're really talking about some dealing with complexities when we're trying to be more inclusive.
Yeah. And you're right, times before were much more simple. There was Missies and Juniors and, what do they call it?
Young
plus
men's
sizes,
and men's
young men's
and
and women's.
plus size,
And it was if you didn't fit those, tough luck on you. But now it's a consumer-driven market, so consumers don't like it if they aren't getting the
They're
fit
left
they
out.
want. Yeah.
Right. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. So that's one big thing. I think collaboration is a really big piece. And I think another thing is, people are finding their corner. You can't be all things to everyone. So you have to, I've learned that so much from you, Bret, in terms of sustainability. It's okay just to do as much as you can. And not fret about, using polyester thread.
Right. It's a journey, not a destination.
Yes.
We don't have all the answers yet. And as long as you're making efforts to move along that path, we're going to see progression. It's not going to be turn a light switch. And I think people just need to understand that.
I think so too. Although sometimes this fashion industry is, I don't know, it's a a term that I read from Lee Edelcourt of Trend Union. She wrote a manifesto in 2015 about kind of what needed to change with the fashion industry. And she says that fashion is so old-fashioned. Because we do things, we make clothes basically the same way we have for 100 years. There's some fancy machines out there that do things, but basically it's very much the same. So back in the late 90s, when I was thinking of what I would do for my PhD, I was real excited about mass customization and body scanning. And back then, we said that by today, we would all go into a mall, get our body scanned. We'd have our body scan on a card. We would go online, and we'd be able to plunk into the company our code from our card and get our perfect size.
In a garment, just like the Jetsons.
Yeah, just like the Jetsons.
Right, exactly. Right.
But I mean, they were looking at technologies that should enable us to do that.
Right, sure.
And Levi tried it, right? They had body scanning in their San Francisco store. I remember going there. I was so excited to do the body scanning, and I went up, and they're like, "It's broken. Here, let me just measure you. It's the same thing." And I was like, "No, that's not
the same
idea.
thing." Right. Yeah.
So I think while it's very exciting, we have all these new avenues that we're going to go to. I think we need to always strive to go further, but accept the fact that it is a slow, like you said, an incremental process.
Right. There's a lot of exciting innovation out there when it comes to sustainability and eco-friendly materials, but we have a very, very long way to go. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. You were just, you were in Europe not that long ago.
I was, yeah.
What did you see happening over there that you found inspiring?
Well, I find Europe inspiring like in every aspect, as I'm sure you guys do. Yeah. But in particular this time, I was there during Haute Couture Week. And I hadn't been since 2018, which was a real pain for me because I go, rather frequently. One of the things that I really was reminded of is the beauty of how everything is connected. So the Sunday I got there, I went to the Musée des Arts Décoratifs for an exhibit about jewelry and design and fashion. And so it was like chairs and jewelry and clothing in this amazingly inspirational exhibit to kind of help you think about how things flow from one industry to another. Mm-hmm. And
what dress you wear when you sit in a specific chair.
Exactly.
Great. That's the French.
That's it. Yeah. And as I was leaving, I noticed in the big hall, they were getting ready for a big fashion show. And so, trying to get in there and see, we were on a balcony. And so I took some pictures, did some videos, and there were these people, there were these models on a runway. Half of them were pulling out a tug of war one way and the other way, a tug of war. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. So then I'm walking out and I realized.
Very French.
Yeah. Yes. Well, actually, it's very American because it was the Tom Brown show rehearsal.
Okay.
If you watch the show, they have a tug of war in there. And his show was very inspired by the Olympics.
Okay.
The show.
I thought it was some angst.
It was.
Between,
yeah. And it was like, at one point, he had models in the three, gold, silver, and bronze on the stage kind of thing. So it was very influenced by the Olympics. And then the next day, I went to the Musée des Arts Décoratifs. No, that was the first day. I went to the Musée Galliera, the fashion museum. Mm-hmm. And they had an exhibit of fashion and sport.
Oh, wow. And Here we are again.
I know,
the Olympics.
Right? Like the whole thing. And I had really anticipated seeing a lot of high-tech fabrics and things, because for me, fashion and sport is high-tech fabrics. But it started out in the late 1800s. And it was a really beautiful pathway through the evolution of really women and sports and what we were able to wear and what we had to wear and what when it was okay to wear bloomers to ride a bicycle. Yes. And, the original bloomers were right there because it's the Paris Fashion Museum.
Yeah.
And so, I had that really delightful pathway through the historic evolution of clothing and sport from a female perspective, which, clothing has been used to restrict women in history majorly. Sure. And so then I was leaving that museum, walking up Georges V, and I see this girl dressed in the Tom Brown uniform of gray pants and a gray jacket, because the day before I went and stood outside of the Musée des Arts Décoratifs because I didn't have an invitation to get into the show, but watching the...
You're supposed to just walk in backwards and say you're leaving. That's the old trick, right?
Sounds good.
Yeah. I've had enough. I'm leaving.
Yeah, right.
Oh, no, don't leave.
But it
I
was,
forgot something.
Yeah, exactly. It was really cool to see all the people outside, and you know how some people just go to be seen outside the shows
Yeah.
and in the entrances. All the important people go into hidden entrances, but
Right.
not all of them. So there were a couple of famous people that I didn't recognize, but everybody was very excited about. But then the next day, I was walking up Georges V and I saw this girl sitting there smoking a cigarette. And I fluent in French, so I just walked up to her and I said, "Hey, what's up? I noticed you're wearing Tom Brown." And she's like, "Oh, I'm one of the showroom managers. Up here on the 7th floor is where we're taking our individual appointments with people to order the collection."
Oh, wow.
And it's just like, it's all through the city.
Yeah.
Right? And then
And she doesn't normally smoke a cigarette, but she did because she was in Paris.
Right, exactly.
Yes.
And then I went to the Georges Pompidou Center, where there was a phenomenal exhibit of Constantin Brancusi, who is a sculptor, mid-century sculpture, and he just happens to be Romanian, like my husband, so I had
there
to
you
go
go.
to see that. And when I walked in, he's famous for these very stylized sculptures, and he has a whole series of the rooster sculpture, which is the symbol of France. So he was like giving homage to his new country, another person that left a country to be in a new
Yeah.
country.
Yeah.
That's in my zeitgeist right now. And the first room was these enormous sculptures, like 24 feet tall, of this rooster abstraction, all in white. Just like Tom Brown's collection.
Whoa.
Wow.
With the angles and the things like was in Tom Brown's collection.
Yeah.
And it was just like full circle. Everything was connecting.
Wow.
It's an amazing city for that.
Yeah.
is.
Do you think it's because all of these artists are getting inspiration from each other? Or do you think that there's almost some invisible thread connecting us that we don't really fully understand?
I think it's the latter.
Yeah.
I do, I ask myself, and I want to ask Tom Brown, so you let me know, if he saw the Brancusi exhibit, or if that had in any way an influence on him, because the connection was really striking to me. And I do think there is this thing that they call the zeitgeist, is the German term for spirit of the times.
Yeah.
Zeit is spirit and times is Zeit and Geist is spirit. And so there is this, this thing, and it's happened since the beginning of time. We talk about cultural appropriation, but back in the prehistoric times, you can find artifacts from South America and Southeast Asia. These people had no way of contacting each other, but we see similarities in
Yeah.
those things.
Yeah.
So there is this like spirit of the times, and that's why I kind of bringing back to what you need to look for in a fashion program, that liberal arts, that openness to read what's going on around you in the world.
Yeah.
That is so important in our industry because, people that don't connect come up with the same thing, and then you're like, how did that happen? And it's just this intangible
And aren't
feeling.
we supercharging that with technology? We're more connected than we ever were.
Yeah.
The algorithms on our phone start, I'm sure Tom Brown saw that sculpture as he was on Facebook paging through
Totally.
and went, "Oh, I've got it," right?
Totally.
So
my phone.
it's amazing how technology can
it does
kind of
that all the
connect us
time.
in a way that really furthers the zeitgeist of today. So
Connection.
Yeah.
So being open to the zeitgeist.
That's right.
Yeah.
And
Right.
being like absorbing it and reading it and then translating it in your own way.
Oh, I love that. Well, thank you for joining us in this conversation, Mary. We've been
you.
trying to get together since you got back from France, and I feel like we almost need a glass of wine here for this conversation. It's very
And a cigarette.
inspirational. And a cigarette, yes.
Right? Yeah, for sure.
But I know we have many additional conversations to explore with you in the future, but it was definitely fun to catch up and
Such a delight. I just love talking about things with you all. It's
Yeah.
really
Likewise.
a great mind-bending activity.
That's
We keep saying that we need to have once a month chats here for the fashion community in St. Louis. We're going to do that.
I think that's a great idea.
Yeah, that sounds good. Well, thank you, Mary. And thank
you.
you for joining us today on Clothing Culture. Do not forget to subscribe to stay apprised of upcoming episodes.